Welcome, everybody, back to Friar Talk. Today, we are going to be talking about Bob Melvin, the man that has been blamed for all of the Padres' failures for some reason. And we're going to go over that, go over his decision making, things that we've liked, things that we've disliked from Bob Melvin. And ultimately, should Bob Melvin be fired at the end of the season, assuming the Padres miss the playoffs? I think a lot of people feel that he should. About a few days ago, I put out a poll just kind of looking at it going, all right, everyone, do you think Bob Melvin should be fired? Do you think AJ Preller should be fired? Do you think neither should be fired? Or do you think both should be fired? And I thought a lot of people were going to only blame Bob Melvin. Turns out that wasn't really the case. I'm pulling up the results right here. But overall, only 8.3% of people thought only Bob Melvin should be fired. 50% of people thought only AJ Preller should be fired, and 25% of people thought that both Melvin and Preller should be fired. So, my initial thoughts on everything, I think that there's only two right answers. I think you only fire AJ Preller or you fire them both. I think if you just fire Bob Melvin, I think you're using him as the scapegoat. And unfortunately, that's what I expect the Padres to do, if I'm being honest. I think only Bob Melvin will be fired, and I think they're going to keep AJ Preller. But we want to talk about what we think about this team and what we think that they should do. So I think that it's one of those two things. You either fire them both or you only fire Preller. Chase, what are your thoughts about Bob Melvin? And also, what do you think about him this year? Like, what do you think about the decision making? Do you think he's done a good job? What's he to be, what should he get blamed for, but what shouldn't he get blamed for? All of that. Unpack it for me.
Does he deserve some of the blame? Absolutely. Is everything his fault? No. The roster construction from the beginning, like you looked at it and you go, okay, should be a solid lineup. And, we have a lot of players who, if they played their career norms, this looks like a way better team than it is right now. Which, unfortunately, a lot of these players have been playing fairly well below their career norms. And it has really affected the team. You've looked at the bullpen where have Steven Wilson and Robert Suarez for the majority of the year where they're out. And if they're in, you probably win a few more games. You're relying on a lot of guys who are kind of unproven and who have also had lackluster seasons. Luis Garcia, just to name one, where he was really solid last year. He was one of the go-to guys in the later innings. And this year he's kind of just not been it. Same thing with Tim Hill. I mean, when you looked at the bullpen and how much they struggled, you only really had one guy you could pitch out there confidently and that he was going to get out of it, and that was Josh Hader. Outside of that, any other time you put a guy in, you were just kind of hoping he got out of the inning unscathed. It was going to look ugly, but you hope he got out of the inning, maybe giving up one run at most. Then you look at the bats. You had a pretty solid starting lineup, and then you look at DH and you go, you kind of had to start Austin Nola at every single game because Campy got hurt. And then you signed Gary Sanchez, and you realize Gary Sanchez is definitely the way at the plate, behind the plate. He was fine. But then you looked at DH, Nelson Cruz and Carpenter were your two options, and picking both of them were both the wrong options. There was no right option there. Both of them were playing very well below their career norms. They're at the tail end of their careers, and you try to revitalize a fossil, and it didn't work. Can he be blamed for any of that? I mean, you also look at the fourth outfielder spot, which the Padres didn't really have a fourth outfielder for majority of the year. They had Ronette Odor, which he had a pretty solid role. Like, he was doing good for his role, but he was nothing special. And then you looked at, okay, you had Brandon Dixon, Matthew Batten. Ozarkar is finally back up, but where had he been for majority of the season? I know he was hurt, but he's been hurt for the past couple months, and he finally just got called up, last week? You could have used the fourth outfielder at like one point when Grish was struggling majorly. You could have had Ozarkar man center every other day just to hopefully get, play the splits. But he wasn't there. And you just look at the roster construction, you go, could he really done that much better with what he had and how the players have been playing? I mean, I think majority of the fault lies within AJ Preller's roster construction and then the players just not playing to their career norms. I mean, Manny's below an 800 OPS. Xander's below an 800 OPS. Cronenworth is barely above a 700 OPS. Tatis is below an 800 OPS. Campusano and Gary have been doing good. But when you looked at Carpenter and Nelson Cruz, they were what, like low 700s of that? At your DH spot, you were just probably well below that then. And you looked at your DH spot, the one place that's supposed to manufacture home runs and slugging wasn't doing that. Your first baseman wasn't doing that. Kim is having his career year. Xander was fighting an injury the entire time because they refused to put him on the IL. I don't know if it was his part or the team's part, but he hasn't been hitting. His power's been lackluster. He hasn't grounded into the most double plays in all of the MLB. Manny's been below average by his standards. Soto's been doing his thing. And then you look at the analytics part, where Bob Melvin at the very beginning of the year said, it's kind of harder to make decisions than it ever has been before, because when I go to make decisions in the bullpen, a lot of the analytics that I had in Oakland are not here with the Padres. We are far behind analytical-wise compared to Oakland. And that's not Bob Melvin's job. He's not an analytics expert or anything. That's Preller's job, to get people to do the analytics for him, and so that they can provide their team with the best shot of winning. And it's not there, which is not Bob Melvin's fault. And if he does get fired, he's just going to be a scapegoat.
Yeah, I agree with that there. And I mean, I think, like, what's the big issue with Bob Melvin? I think it's pretty clear. His pitching moves have not been good. That is the issue with Bob Melvin. His decision last season last time around in the postseason, when he pitched Manaea and pitched Clev multiple times, and you can make the argument they didn't have that many guys, that many arms or whatever. They shouldn't have gone that route. And the game where they pitched Clev and then they brought in Manaea after, that was abysmal, right? This year, you see him a lot, kind of, and I feel like we see this with Darvish a lot. Darvish will get left in too long. Someone else will get pulled too early. But then people will be like, oh, well, you pulled him and then the bullpen fell apart. But it's like, the bullpen hasn't been good. It's really hard for him to make a good decision. The bullpen is bad. That's the bigger issue. And then you look into you dive a little bit deeper into the decision making, and it shouldn't all be his fault. He should be guided into making those decisions. And you could be like, well, some of them are bad moves. Yeah, that's fair. Other managers and other organizations don't have those issues. Why? Because they know who to go to. They know when their pitcher is going to struggle. They know, who to when to take them out. They have more guidelines for the managers and for the, if that's, I don't know if it's always Melvin. I feel like Niebla probably has some say in it as well. But there should be more guidelines of okay, well, this is an awful spot to put Tim Hill in. Oh, this is a great spot to put Tim Hill in. Oh, you should definitely pull Darvish right now. He's probably going to struggle. Or, keep Snell in for one inning. Who cares if he's at 90 pitches? These next three guys, he's probably gonna go through them 1, 2, 3. Whatever that is. They don't have that ability. And that's the thing, where if I'm looking at Bob Melvin, and if you want Bob Melvin fired and you think that the best move for the Padres is to clean house, get rid of AJ and Bob Melvin and kind of do a little bit of a reset, I can live with that. I think that's fine. But if you think that firing Bob Melvin is going to fix the Padres issue, and having AJ Preller, this is his fourth manager, right? It would be his fourth manager. What? What are we talking about, man? That's not going to fix the issues. We saw how bad it was when Preller hired his buddy in Dingler, when the Padres had Andy Green. I don't know, man. I think Bob Melvin would get scooped up by another team almost immediately if he didn't retire, if he wanted to keep managing. And I think the Padres would end up downgrading at their manager. I think that I think it's easy sometimes when you're watching a game to be like, why would you pull him? It didn't work. Like hindsight's 2020, yeah. But and I also think that this like I feel like I hear this like notion that like, oh, he doesn't get the guys fired up. That it makes no sense. That makes no sense. Listen to every player that's played under Bob Melvin talk about how much they respect and how important he is to them. And Bob Melvin also gets ejected like more than like a lot of other managers because he gets absolutely animated and he gets fired up. I think that's bad. So I think that he's put in a position almost to fail. And I don't know. That's the issue with it.
100%. You could look at his biggest faults, and it's all basically starting pitching related. It's not really the roster, like the lineups and everything. Like he found out that, hey, you know what? We put Kim at lead up or lead off, and guess what? Great things happen. And you kind of, I guess the one fault was, hey, you know what? Maybe we should move X down in the lineup instead of putting him at 4 or 5. Like X at 4 or 5 has been killing us. I mean, like I said earlier, he is grounded into the most double plays. I think he's at, last time I saw the stat, it was at 17. He might be at more, might be a little bit more. I don't know. But having a guy like that sitting in your 4 spot, it's just killing you. Every time you guys get someone on base and he hits into a double play to either end the inning or just to erase guys on base, you're not going to win games like that. Like I think that's one of his other faults is he puts some guys where they do really well. And yeah, maybe X was a great career 4 hitter in Fenway, but when the guy doesn't have it, the guy doesn't have it. You need to not be stuck in your way and move him down in the lineup. I know you didn't really have a better option in the beginning half of the season, but after you signed Gary and as soon as you got Conti back, X needs to move down.
Dude, that's something I totally agree with. And it's funny that you say that because I think it was yesterday, and we're recording this on Wednesday. So yesterday the Padres put up a bunch of runs and stuff, but I was just watching and I was like, why are they still running out with the same like top of the lineup? Like it's just like I get that you want to have structure because that's something that we would always rip Tangler for. Is that it would be like he's here, and they'd bounce guys around all the time. But I do think there's times where you move a guy for a while if he's slumping or you do something. And I definitely think at this point, Xander Bogaerts should not be. He should be like the 6th hitter. Cronenworth has been hot lately, right? We'll move him up to 5. And I know that he was struggling earlier. Well, he's hot now. Oh, Campy's in the lineup. Then hit Campy 5, man. God, like please hit Campy 5. I think you also got to give him some credit too, because like he did adjust the lineup a decent amount. We're like Kim leading off, brilliant. Go look at Kim's splits when he's leading off to when he's not. Kim, like, that's when Kim has had his biggest jump ever in his MLB career is when he started leading off. He's hitting like 340 or 350 from the leadoff spot and has like a near 1,000 OPS. Like, so I think you got to give him some credit there, but I do think there's times like I think the 1 through 4 is good, but like Xander is like if Xander's struggling a lot and he doesn't have like move him down. Like who cares? Who cares if you just sign him to a deal? He's hurt. He's hurt. He's struggling. Maybe this is who he is, but you're hoping it's not, and you're hoping because it's because he's hurt and he's going to bounce back next year. But guess what? This year he doesn't have it. So let's adjust. Let's play the hot hand. Let's move guys around because, and I think that like part of it, like you're right, like guys having like down years, that's something that it's not on him. But I do think some of the runners in scoring, like runner in the scoring position issues, some of that can be attributed to the way you design the lineup. All of it? No. Like, let's blame the players before we start blaming Bob Melvin. And I think we see this a lot too, just in general in coaching, where it's like, let's blame the coach before the players. It's like, guys, your coaches are only moving the needle so much. Like either way, either to really help you or to really hurt you. Like there are a handful of amazing coaches. You know, the Bill Belichick's, right? Like the top of the top and like the Bruce Bochy's, I guess, in baseball. I don't know if I'd put him up there, but like the way that Padres fans talk about Bruce Bochy, like, right? Like people love Bruce Bochy. That's who people want. And I feel like that's usually what gets brought up in the Bob Melvin conversation is like, man, only if we had Bochy. And like I get it. I think Bochy's he's a better manager, right? But I think that like it gets overestimated, like Bob Melvin causing this team struggles. I don't really think that's the case. So I don't know, man. That's kind of where I'm at with it all. I think that if you want to fire them both and kind of clean house, I I'm not going to be upset. That's a fair assumption after this year. But if you think that the Padres firing Bob Melvin is going to fix their problems, only firing Bob Melvin is going to fix their problems, I think you're in for a rude awakening. So that's kind of my final piece on it. Chase, is there anything else you want to bring up? You made a funny face when I talked about the best coaches.
No, I'm just like, I was trying to think of like some of the best coaches in the MLB, and it's like you look at some of the coaches and you go, yeah, you know what, that guy makes a difference on a team. But you also look at coaches like Kevin Cash, where they're somewhat too analytically driven, and it's sometimes their downfall. Yeah, Kevin Cash won Manager of the Year, but was the best decision really to pull Blake Snell when he's having his career game in the World Series, the Dodgers, and he's just mowing through hitters just because he's going through his third time around? I mean, yeah, there's great managers and they still have their faults. So, like, if a three-time manager of the year can't take the Padres to where they are, then I don't think any manager could. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think going back, like, I think baseball's also a little bit different because, like, in other sports, right? Like Phil Jackson, like, he's an all-timer. Why? Because he created the triangle offense. Bill Belichick is one of the best defensive coaches ever. You know, like, it's like a lot of times it's stuff like that. Bill Walsh, like, what all-time, like, created the West Coast offense, right? Like, you don't really see that in modern baseball as much, where it's more like you're saying, like, it's more analytically driven. And it's like you just don't have as big of an emphasis on the game as other sports. So I think it's even less in baseball, where it's like, all right, guys, like, let's not put everything on the manager. Like, there's times where you can blame them for certain losses and making bad decisions, but overall, there's less of an impact for that spot. And it's more about like managing. I don't know. I think, like, you see stuff with, like, how guys, like, change, you know, like we see, like, Ruben Niebla's impact, but it's not the same thing as, like, other sports where it's like this head coach needs to be fired or this manager, right? It's a little bit different. So I think that's something that's fair to bring up with just the overall Padres struggles of not trying to blame, you know, your coach or manager in that situation and be like, it's all on him. Like, no, we can't say that. That's just not accurate of what's going down. So, but I think that's our overall thoughts. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with us. I mean, that's fine. We're speaking our mind on what we feel about this team. So when we've mentioned it in streams and stuff, like, we think the guy to blame in terms of coaching management and that kind of side of it is AJ Preller. And we think the players are to blame too, because they're the ones that are struggling. So I think Bob Melvin's the last on the list of players, GM, coach, you know. So could you fire him? Sure. Would it do much? I don't think so. But that's going to do it for today. So we'll be back on Sunday. We'll be going live at the end of this Diamondback series. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'm actually going to a game, first game this year on Saturday, so I'm excited for that. But we'll talk to you guys on Sunday. So have a great weekend, and hopefully the Padres are in a better spot. See y'all.